hello, welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Jess. I think my head is cut off. I can see myself. That's kind of far. I also need to order new glasses. That's not what I say. Welcome or welcome back to my channel. Obviously, this is gonna be a review about Katabasis is apparently how you say it, not Katabasis. That's what I've been saying for over a year, but apparently it's Katabasis by Rebecca F. Kwong. That's what we're going to be talking about. Mostly non-spoilery. I will have a little spoiler section at the end. Thank you to the lovely Harper Voyager for sending me this early copy. Like, this is not even there are ARC copies that have the actual art, but this came out before. But as you know, life happened. So before I start, I would like to say, I was telling Angela this when I was still reading it, that I was going to mention in my review that how long it took me to read it. And she was like, that's valid though, because a lot of people who aren't us, who are reading constantly, sometimes take months to finish one book. It's on their nightstand and they read a little bit every night. So I did start this. Did I get this in February? I did start this in either March or February. And then everything was happening with the move and Nigel. So obviously that took me a while. I finished this at the beginning of June or end of May. And I meant to film my review then, but I was getting ready for a trip and I didn't. So this did take me a while to finish. I think multiple things contributed to that. But here is my review. Again, we're starting with non-spoilers. So if you don't know, R.F. Kwong is one of my favorite authors. She wrote The Poppy War, which is an adult fantasy, military fantasy war trilogy, which I love. I love The Poppy War. The Dragon Republic is my favorite book. The second book is my favorite book of that one. I will say the ending wasn't my favorite. I didn't hate it, but wasn't my favorite. Overall, I love the trilogy. Then she wrote, what did we get? Was it Yellowface did we get first, or did we get Babel? I think Babel, which I love, top tier story. That's more historical fantasy, literary. Then she wrote Yellowface, which is more a contemporary, a literary fiction story. I feel like they're all very different. And then we have this one, which I think a lot of people are going to maybe compare this one to Babel, which I think they're different. Again, that's my opinion. But this one, which I only read a little bit about, was basically about someone following somebody else to hell. So essentially we have Alice Law, and she and, what's his name? Peter. Why do I want to call him Peter Griffin? That's not his name. Peter Murdoch. And they both, I've kind of forgotten a lot. Okay, they're both at Cambridge, and they are doing their PhDs in analytical magic, and they have the same advisor, and essentially their advisor has died, and they're like, well, we know he went to hell. We gotta go get him. Because they're far into their PhD programs, where they're we're nearing the end. We have busted our butt for this man, because of course he's terrible. We have done all these things. He is our key to success, and all we both care about is being successful in analytical magic, and he's the key to that. And so yes, it makes perfect sense that we go to hell and we drag his ass back, basically. Sounds like a great premise. Now, I don't know, I haven't watched, I know, shame on me, any of Rebecca's interviews, but I feel so I could be making this up. On the back that says, Alice Law, you naughty girl, you're trying to go to hell. I feel like I've seen people kind of pitch this or talk about it as if it's an enemies to lovers or rivals to lovers kind of story. And there is rivals, I guess you can say lovers, but I just would say don't go into this expecting a heavy romance element. It's there, but it's not heavy. It's also not great. So I made some outline of notes so I could, because I went back through kind of some of my tabs about the book. There's lots of philosophy and like logic discussed in the book. And months ago, there were a ton of people on Book Talk who were saying, here are the books you need to read before you read Katabasis. And it was like, was it the Odyssey or the Iliad? Like all of these different books, Dante's Inferno. You do not have to read any of those before reading this book. You do not. I feel like after reading this book, I'm like, oh, I would be interested in maybe reading Dante's Inferno or something. But it's nothing, there's no prerequisite. Like you do not need to read those to understand this. And that's also a strength, but also is going to come up as a negative because, trust me, Rebecca is going to explain it. Okay? So, strengths. Obviously the premise, like to university students who may have a thing for each other going to hell, that sounds really cool. I haven't read many stories about hell, and so that just already sounded interesting because we start off talking about the different Alice Lost set out to rescue her advisor's soul from the 8 courts of hell. And so like I've, seen it referenced in other texts, but never have read a book specifically about that. So I was like, that's going to be super cool. And then also if there is like a little antagonistic, angsty love thing in there, that's an added bonus. So premise. Mwah. Also the conversation on academia, how toxic it is, which I think is like a main thing of this story, I think is really important because, and obviously Rebecca would know, she's got like 19 degrees. And I just heard from other people that I know in either in a degree program, in a PhD program, teaching how toxic it is, how underworked or overworked, underpaid, the whole thing with tenure. Like these people are literally they are so strung out, so on the edge, about to lose it, that they're willing to go to hell to drag back their advisor. And over time, we get to see their dynamic with each other, obviously at university, but also with the advisor and the shady things that he's done. And of course, he's well known and renowned in his field, but of course he treats his students like shit, which is seems to be the norm in so many industries, especially in academia. And how he's spiteful, and if you're not going to do what he wants, how he's going to go behind your back and take credit for something that's not his. So I really loved those parts because I'm like, obviously this is fantastical, but I'm like, it makes sense that they were this desperate and just like this brainwashed to go after this man because of how toxic academia could be. And I'm not even someone with a higher degree besides a bachelor's and just like know on the periphery. So I just think that's a really important conversation and interesting to read about in a fantastical way. And I will say I did put funny moments because there were some that did make me laugh. And which is nice because, a lot of it is not so happy. They're obviously in hell and facing a challenge and starting out, and they go to hell, but hell's big. There's 8 courts, and they come across all of these different beings, creatures, obstacles. So those moments of levity were nice. I can't like point out a quote for you or anything. I don't know if I highlighted any of those, but I still did have some moments where I was like, that was funny. Also, then this is going to be both in the positives and the negative, is like the exposition, the breakdown of all of these, their analytical magic, the philosophical, the logical, mathematical theories that go into everything in the story was really interesting because I've taken like philosophy 101. Yeah, and like maybe one other class, but I don't know, I haven't read a lot of philosophy or logic or anything like that. So that was interesting to learn, and I liked learning about like the magical bits. What does this say? And the lore of the underworld, or at least the underworld that she was building, because I don't know if you can, do you know what I'm saying? But just talking about the different courts and what they stand for and who would be in those, because that's kind of part of their journey, is trying to figure out, okay, which one of these would he stay in the longest, basically like what has he done, like what would be his thing of like where he would be in what court. So that was interesting, again, because I've like read references to Dante's Inferno, or it's, there's been a reference to it in a book or something, but this is the closest I've gotten to like reading all of that. So I found that really interesting. Behold, because that will come back to be negative. And I do also have another one for this one, counterpart in the negative, because I don't think the world building or hell building was that great of like the locations, but I did think that the other souls, beings, entities that they come across were really, I felt were really greatly described. I can visualize them, like those scenes when they were interacting with them felt really vivid to me, and those felt like some of the most like impactful, memorable, when the story really felt like full and robust, when it was more than just Peter and Alice. We can go into what the negatives would be, into the characters, because I just don't feel like they were that developed. We do get to know about them before university a little bit, well, before they're here in hell, through some flashbacks, and can see how their lives were, and then how they came into contact with each other, what their relationship was before this all went down. But I felt like that was a big downside for me, because a lot of it is just them, and I was like, they just weren't strong enough characters. I don't want to say to hold my attention, but it did feel sometimes like just being with them, or just in Alice's mind, it felt like a drag sometimes. And in that same vein, the romance, again, don't go into this like expecting that to be like a big part of the story. It's there, obviously. But because when the characters don't feel strong to me, the romance can't feel strong and believable to me. There were moments of like little angst, where they're, maybe not communicating or something, where there's like a little bit, you can feel a little spark. And like, it's not inconceivable that they would have feelings for each other, but it definitely isn't like someone in love or falling in love. It just felt really juvenile and not really well developed. So just don't go into being like thinking this is not a fantasy romance, it's not a romantasy, like don't go into it thinking that. Also on my downsides, the timeline. So like I said before, we learn about them, and beforehand we get flashbacks, and sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. It did not work in this instance for me, because I feel like both with flashbacks to just before and with some exposition in the book that I was grateful for, because it was explaining things I'm not familiar with because I haven't read certain things, or I'm not familiar with philosophy. But they felt like they came at the worst moments. Like something's happening, you're like, oh my gosh, is one about to die? Or something is coming towards them, you're like, oh my gosh, you end that chapter, or you turn that page, and then it's like 5 to 7 pages of a flashback chapter, or 3 to 5 pages of exposition explaining this one concept. And I'm like, not right now. I feel like this book could have benefited from the use of footnotes like Babel, and I did read the ones in Babel. I read them all, but sometimes I'm like, that could have been a footnote, and I could have come back to, I don't know, it just didn't, the flow of the story. This book is already 500, at least this copy is 539. Yeah, 539 pages, and the pacing just did not work for me. I remember I think I was on like a reading sprint, and I was like 50%, and something like was happening, and I was like, wait, how is this happening? And I still have half of this book to go. So it felt like some of this could have been cut down if we could have put that in like footnotes, or like reference like notes in the back if you wanted to read more about that. Like there's still things you would have to explain, but maybe not all of those pages you can put in the back, because when I'm interested in stuff like that, I do go into the back and reference stuff like that. But so that was really off. The pacing Um, and the structure of the dual timeline didn't work for me in this instant, and it would just, I would read a couple chapters and be like, oof, all right, I'm gonna put it down. And so just like I said, I put right here also exposition. While I was grateful for basically like those educational dumps, the exposition to explain things, it was too much at one time and poorly placed to me. And then world building. While I think the people or beings, whatever they interacted with, I still feel like for hell to be the setting of the story, it felt very blank. In my mind, I envisioned just like barren fields, like when they first come in and there's like a wall, that's very distinct. But after that, besides that and like the river, nothing. And obviously there's some where they go in a building or something, but like it's very vague. And I'm a person, when I read, I visualize things, and if you do a good job describing it, it is like a movie up in here. Okay, full color. Okay, what are we at now? 4K, 8K, ultra, UHD, whatever it is, that's what it is up here. And that, it felt just like a drab, barren landscape, and maybe like you would have the river and a thing here or two, and then, you know, like the characters pretty prominent, but the backdrop, the world, felt very lackluster, and that made me sad. The stakes didn't really feel high. Like, I think after the 50% mark is when I was like, okay, oh, all right. I don't know. It just, because it would feel like we were on like the precipice of imminent danger. Oh my goodness, how are we gonna figure this out? And then it'd be like, okay. Like it just kept going like that. And obviously they are journeying through courts. They're having to figure out ways that they get to pass through. They are having to go through some different things with people, creatures, entities they encounter. But it just, not like things don't happen to them, right? They don't get through scot-free. They don't get through unscathed. But I think for just how long it dragged on and like where certain things were happening, I was like, all right. You know, I just didn't have that and just didn't have that feeling that there was a lot here at stake beside, especially once you get to a certain point and I'm like, all right, do I even care? And I hate when I feel like that. And the payoff, what happens in the end, didn't feel worth the journey. And I don't know if that's because I have been reading this book for so long, or it just didn't feel like a good payoff. But I'm like, I finished it and was like, okay. Like, I didn't put it down. I was like, oh, I need to think. I need to, oh my goodness. And like, I put it down and I was like, all right, well, that's done. And that's just kind of how I felt about the entire story for the most part. It felt fine. Like, I think I kept waiting to be like, oh yeah, this is going to be a 5-star. And it never came. There were moments where I'm like, ooh, I'm really enjoying it at this moment. And then it would kind of dip down. I'm like, ooh, I'm really enjoying it. And around like the 30 to 45%, I was like, oh yeah, oh yeah. And then we get up to 50. And then I'm like, wait, I'm only halfway through. So it just, my overall feeling of the book is that it's fine. And that makes me sad because I love her books. I think that, I know people had complaints. They didn't think characterization was strong in Babel. They thought it was slow. Or they didn't think maybe the magic system was great. That's fine. That's your opinion. I did not feel that way. And then this book does not make me change how I felt about Babel. Because that still felt, it felt good to me. I connected with the characters. I loved the conversation on colonization and the translation and magic. And this one, I don't want to say it's because I didn't know, because I go into things not knowing all the time. I don't think you need to know about philosophy or theory or whatever to enjoy this. I think that and I've seen other people say this, and I don't know how to explain it because people are like, I think this could have been like a really good narrative nonfiction. And this may sound dumb, but I'm just going to say it anyway. Could it be considered nonfiction since like you can't prove that hell is real? Do you know what I'm saying? But like, this doesn't, I don't know how to explain it, because I think this could take out the even little romantic subplot, and maybe even the whole them following their professor to hell, and maybe just someone's journey through hell. I don't know. Usually I like to say what I think could have been done better, and I don't know. Besides fleshing out the characters more, and that does not mean that the character has to be likable, right? Because Alice, whoo, but she still felt like over this journey she didn't really grow that much. Peter feels just really plain, and he feels almost like the same person at the start and the end of the story. I think the dual timeline did a disservice, and the heaps of exposition. So I guess I do have those suggestions that I think would have made it better, adding more like a footnotes and notes in the back instead of just like dumping it all in the middle of the story. Because it is interesting, and I would like to read something else about this in the Courts of Hell, and then you're adding in like a fantastical story, a journey, but this just wasn't the one. You really didn't need any kind of romantic element at all, but alas, it's there. So this last part will be a quick spoiler because, again, I can't remember that much in depth to tell you anything, but I just wanted to say because there's a trope and I want to talk about it. So 3, 2, 1, spoilers. One of my least favorite tropes is in play here, and it is the resurrection trope, because Peter dies and she is able to bring him back at the end, and I think they do get their professor back, and then they go back to Cambridge, and the book basically ends about them like climbing back up into like the room at the university, and then that was it. I think there may have been some professions of love. I don't recall. I also misplaced my tabs towards the end of this, so I don't have those marks, and I was just trying to get through it. So that was really the only spoilery thing I wanted to say, is that I really dislike the resurrection trope, and the only time I won't care about it is if I really love a character, and even then, it's like that hurts though. Like, that makes it hurt so good. That's a stake. That is something you're like, damn, and they can't come back. And I won't say that I was predicting that. I just was like, I don't know why it never felt like he was really gone. I was like, oh, he probably just is in a different little level of hell or something. Okay, end of spoiler. Literally, it was so quick. I don't have anything really specific to go into. So I am curious of your thoughts, if you've read this or if you are going to read it. I've read a lot of mixed reviews. I feel like the ones I've seen, a lot of 3 stars. Well, that's probably where I'd fall, 2.5 to 3 stars. Which, that makes me feel terrible, but it is what it is. I can't come on the internet and lie because it's my favorite author. And if you have similar reading taste to me, then you may not, because I loved Babel and I didn't love this. So just keep me in your thoughts, okay? Because it hurts. There's so many pretty editions, and I'm not getting any of them. Ugh. Will I be purchasing whatever Rebecca writes next? Of course. Of course. There's too much that I love to give up after one. Now, if there's like 3 books in a row that are flops, then I'll reevaluate. But for now, this one it just didn't hit for me. What a disappointment. So if you read it, I'd love to know your thoughts, or are you going to read it? I don't really have much else to say, so I will not keep yapping for the sake of a yap. But like I don't even know, you know? The world's a dumpster fire. Everything's a disaster, and one of my most anticipated reads was a letdown. What the fuck? Why? Anyway, that's it. Stay blessed, hydrated, moisturized, and sunscreen. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.